word being thrown around is sadistic, what these incarcerated individuals are experiencing and how the powers that be are allowing these conditions to persist.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
John Glenn wrote a report about this potential prison strike in Alabama for the Alabama Political Reporter, and he joins us now to talk about that. John, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Of course, thank you so much for inviting me on.
Absolutely. So before we get into the potential prison strike, can you expand on some of the conditions that these workers, these prisoners, are running up against right now in Alabama prisons?
Of course, it's the same conditions that incarcerated individuals and folks aware of the situation within Alabama's correctional system have been speaking about for years now, and that being the increasing violence between incarcerated individuals, the inhumane and unconstitutional treatment by correctional staff, the rampant narcotic use that the ADOC is presently incapable of preventing, the deterioration of physical prison structures, meaning the overcrowding, the actual buildings that these folks are housed in, and again, the death on a scale that the majority of individuals in the state seem really not to fully grasp. It's important to note that these individuals inside the prison are striking due to these general conditions on top of the working conditions that they face. And something that I've heard in conversations with folks is that this lack of proper incentives to rehabilitate themselves and better themselves while in prison, which is the point, that's the primary reason that this general strike, or this strike within the prisons, and this protests, this sit down and protests outside of the prison are happening. When you speak directly about the working conditions for those who have jobs in prisons, they are practically the same as the ones that they face outside of the work environment. And, think about these prisons. They don't have air conditioning. These work areas are dangerous. Most facilities have rodents or some sort of infestation. They lack correctional staff at a level that is I haven't seen, and I doubt that other people have seen in recent years. And so these are the conditions that they're facing. And it's the reasoning behind, at least in conversations with folks that I've spoken with, behind going forward this strike.
Yeah, and like I mentioned when we spoke to Eddie Burkhalter, formerly with the Alabama Political Reporter and the Anniston Star, currently with Alabama Appleseed, these 90-some-odd% of people in Alabama prisons are going to be reintroduced to the public. And not only is that a fact of the matter, that is what most people would want. Most people do not want people locked in cages for the rest of their lives, even for some violent crimes. You beat somebody up, even you shoot somebody in the leg, you rob somebody. Nobody thinks that even these things that are violent and despicable, and certainly we should condemn them, and we should encourage people not to do them, where you shouldn't shoot people. But even these things, we don't want people locked up for the rest of their lives. So that's a fact of the matter. That's what the people want. And so the question is, what are our prisons going to look like? Are they going to actually be facilities for rehabilitation and reintroduction into society? Or are they going to be places where abuse happens, places where people are functionally tortured, places where people are raped, places where people get addicted to drugs, get involved in gang activities? And the fact of the matter is that these things are all more representative of the reality of Alabama prisons than the ideal of them being places for rehabilitation. Is that an accurate summary in your opinion, John?
Yes, more or less. Understand that, in my work with this particular beat that I cover, which I've only been covering since basically I did left APR. It's amazing to me to see how horrible it is, the conditions within these prisons, and then like the lack of response that you have outside of the prisons. I mean, I mean, the word being thrown around is sadistic. It can be considered sadistic, what these incarcerated individuals are experiencing, and how the powers that be are allowing these conditions to persist. Yeah.
What kind of work do
That's
these
fair,
incarcerated workers do?
Well, it's everything from working in the kitchens to maintenance to running the stores to cutting the grass to cutting people's hair to, I guess, more cliched stuff that we assume incarcerated folks just do in prisons, being that, manufacturing of license plates, furniture. There's also, I believe at the women's facility, they make clothing and things of that nature. I mean, these, with the jobs inside of the prisons, again, like working in the kitchen, maintenance, those are highly essential jobs that without these incarcerated individuals, the ADOC couldn't get done, and they lack the correctional staff to staff those particular jobs in the event that folks walk away from their jobs on Monday, which is supposed to be the beginning of this strike, if it is to happen. So that's kind of the scope of what they do. It's not limited to that, but that's more or less some of the examples of what they do in prison.
And this isn't the first time that incarcerated workers in Alabama prisons have gone on strike. We actually spoke about one a couple of years ago and the very beginning of the program. And can you tell us how have what has the success been in these former prison strikes? I think at one point I read an article from 2016 or 2017 that alleged that some of the corrections staff actually joined the prisoners in these strikes, or in one of these strikes back in 2016, 2017. I haven't been able to confirm that. But what has there been any success, if any, and what have been the ramifications for workers, for prisoners, for incarcerated workers that have gone on strike in the past?
Well, if those strikes were successful, I don't believe it's been seen yet, because one of the consistent things that they have been protesting is I believe it's within the Alabama Constitution. It's the section that mirrors the 13th Amendment, which, of course, it outlaws slavery, indentured servitude, except in cases of working of people that are that this servitude is a punishment for a crime. Those things still exist, and the conditions still exist. If they have been successful, I don't think we've seen the fruits of that success yet. But you mentioned about the ramifications that some individuals may face if they go on strike on Monday, based on the previous reactions from the ADOC, from correctional staff. They've faced everything from alleged denying of meals or delaying of meals to being locked into segregated cells, which are otherwise, that's solitary confinement in layman term. For years, this was the case of Robert Earl, who's one of the better known prison organizers, who helped begin that worker strike in 2016. It began on May Day of 2016. It was the largest in U.S. history. And during that particular strike, as well as those that have happened after that, you have instances of threats of excessive violence from correctional staff, or actual instances of excessive violence from correctional staff, which is commonplace enough in Alabama's correctional system. Most recent example from January of 2021, as reported in the Montgomery Advertiser, there was a hunger strike that happened among incarcerated individuals at Kilby. And at least one of those individuals alleges that he was beaten as a result of that participation in the hunger strike at Kilby by a correctional guard. And in conversations with folks that I've had, it seems that the retaliation for this current organizing effort is happening as we speak. I was speaking to one of the folks organizing the protest that's happening in conjunction with the beginning of the strike on Monday. It's supposed to happen outside of the ADOC building Monday morning. One of the organizers was speaking to me and said that her husband, who is a incarcerated individual inside of a state prison, was locked into solitary confinement somewhat recently in an act of apparent retaliation for her efforts outside organizing this protest. So it affects people inside and outside, and so that's basically it.
Is it I think I know the answer to this, but is it legal for the corrections facility to throw people in solitary confinement for protesting? Is it legal for them to beat them?
Well, I can't strictly speak to the legality of things. I'm not a lawyer. I have a very peripheral knowledge of the norms and the regulations of what correctional officers are allowed to do. But I will say, I mean, things like denial of meals is directly illegal. That's a violation of statutes mandating that you have to feed individuals in prison. The First Amendment protects incarcerated individuals' right to speech in a certain sense. It's limited, particularly when it comes to correspondence and things. And in those Supreme Court precedents, essentially what it is, it's instances where the integrity of the correctional facility could be compromised by free speech by these incarcerated individuals, and so that's how it's limited. But things like communications to the outside world, particularly of a legal matter, are protected, I believe. Again, I can only speak to this as someone who covers this. I'm not a lawyer in any way, shape, or form. I was hearing from an individual at Limestone Correctional Facility who was speaking to me about the organizing efforts up there, and said that the warden apparently, and I can't get this confirmed, but apparently has threatened to take away their tablets. They have these state issued tablets where they can download music, play apps. It's just a normal like iPad looking thing. And that's also a way for them to communicate with individuals outside, right? They have an email service on there that they use. And so there might be an argument that something like taking away those tablets would be considered unconstitutional, since, a certain amount of their communication is protected. But I can't speak as an expert on that particular instance. Something else that he was telling me was that apparently that there is some talks that the warden may delay their chow time or take away their meals, which is a violation. But it's also it's important to note that the individuals working in those kitchens are incarcerated folks themselves, and so if they go on strike, it's obvious that there won't be food, simply because those folks who would prepare that food they're not working; they're on strike.
Right.
And I think he was mentioning to me. This was somewhat recently. He said that they've started making sandwiches in preparation for folks walking away from the kitchen. And so I'm imagining there's food stockpiled, but I again can't speak to that, all unconfirmed, but it's just what I've been told by individuals who spoke with me.
And have any officers, to your knowledge, faced any discipline for their alleged role in any of this retaliation?
I'm sure that it's happened in the past for instances of just blatantly egregious acts that simply can't go unnoticed by the powers that be. But I mean, I'm not aware, frankly, and that just it's a product of me only covering this for so long. I was not in media in this state, at least in 2018, when the latest strike happened at this scale. But I mean, the most recent example I mentioned from 2021, where the fellow at Kilby was allegedly beaten by correctional staff. for his role in the hunger strike that was happening there. I remember reading that a spokesman for the ADOC told the Montgomery Advertiser that there was an investigation ongoing. Whether or not that individual was reprimanded, suspended, I have no knowledge of that. I'm sure it's happened, but again, I have no knowledge of that.
So, I think this is some pretty good groundwork that we've set. Coming to the present, in your article on Wednesday, you mentioned that the cohesiveness of this organization that's going to be that's pushing the strike that you said is supposed to happen on Monday now. That remains to be seen. Have you been able to, since Wednesday, figure out the seriousness of this strike threat? Does it seem to be reasonable to assume that this is going to go forward on Monday?
Yes, at this moment, it seems reasonable in conversations, again, that I've had with individuals since Wednesday, that this is going to happen starting on midnight Monday. And the incohesiveness that I was mentioning in that particular article is based on a couple of conversations that I had where people would be talking about the different agendas that came up, usually around social media groups, prison advocacy groups, and things like that, that include things that aren't on the official list of demands. And it's also important to note, again, that they haven't been officially released yet. They are most likely still working on their final codified list of demands, list of agendas. But different things like, I remember seeing that one that had the repeal of the drive-by statutes and a more streamlined process for furloughs, medical furloughs, and review of elderly folks that are in our correctional facilities. So it's not like these demands aren't necessarily inconsistent with the ones that I have already been told about, the ones that I've been able to see. They're just increasing the scope of things, and it appears at least that the organizing folks, again, from conversations that I have, are trying to limit it to a more direct and how would one say? They're essentially trying, like they have their list of agenda. Yeah. That way that when it does come time to negotiate and discuss these things, it's obvious that their side of things isn't illogical, and it isn't, it's right. It's rational, because basically what, again, they're arguing for is more humane and constitutional treatment within the prisons. I mean, that's the base of this. And
have you seen any response from lawmakers or people within the ADOC to these plans? Have you seen any indication that the people with the power to meet these demands are moving towards what the prisoners are asking for?
I haven't personally. I have no idea if anyone, particularly in the Alabama state legislature, is even aware of this or has any plans to act on this, because it's also, again, most of what they're asking for is repealing of certain laws, be they the Habitual Offender Act, and that would have to take place in the state legislature. There's only so much the ADOC can do with that, and whether or not the ADOC is either taking this seriously or is aware of this also remains to be seen. But I'm sure that they're somewhat aware of this at the present moment. But I haven't seen any indication of movement by the powers that be, frankly, at the moment. But we'll have to see Monday, which is, again, that's when it's supposed to happen.
John Glenn, reporter at the Alabama Political Reporter. We appreciate your time on this. This is a very interesting, important thing that folks in Alabama are going through. Thanks.
Of course. Thank you.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free, to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.